just to, I guess, to start things off, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit, tell us a little bit about you, and then we can get the ball rolling from there.
Sure. So my name is Joe Rinaldi. I'm 27 years old and I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania with my wife. I am a doctor of physical therapy and a performance coach. And in addition to those things, I do quite a bit of writing and I'm getting into the world of speaking. And outside of that, I really just enjoy fitness. It's a huge part of who I am. I've been in the weight room ever since I was a teenager, probably like 13, 14 years old, and just absolutely fell in love with it. And that kind of brings us to today where I'm diving into the world of endurance sports, practicing physical therapy here and there, working as an online performance coach, and doing the podcast scene a little bit as well.
That's pretty cool. A lot of different stuff going on, and really, like, starting from the beginning, how did you get in? You said you got in pretty young, but was it due to sports or was it just an interest in the weight room?
Oh man, well, it's kind of a long story. How much time do you have? And I could get into it. So I grew up in New Jersey, in Westfield, New Jersey, which is just a suburb, and really normal childhood for the most part. Except one morning when I was 10, I woke up and I just couldn't see out of my right eye. I had lost sight in my right eye. Went to the doctor. Went to a bunch of doctors. Got diagnosed with something called Best disease, which is a juvenile onset macular dystrophy, or if that doesn't make sense, just an inherited condition that causes progressive eyesight loss. And so throughout my kind of like 10, 11, 12-year-old range there, I lacked a lot of confidence and I felt really frustrated with my circumstances. And I think the gym was a way for me to kind of, for lack of a better term, just like get out all of my frustration and at the same time build a little bit of confidence in something I could control, which was how hard I worked in the weight room. And looking back at it now, it's kind of funny because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I was not recovering. I was working out 7 days a week, just doing like any exercise I desired. Like, I did chest like three times in a row, like legs 5 times in a row. But I really found a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment, and I learned quite a bit about myself in the gym. And that process stuck with me throughout high school, throughout college, and to this day. It's just something I don't know what my life would look like without.
I can imagine just like that one day kind of happening like that. What was it like there for a while? Like, when you're that age, it's just almost like you want to be like everybody else, and it just not being like everybody else is really scary.
Totally. No, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's I think different is just the way I felt. I felt different, and it was a weird kind of different because on the outside nobody knew I was different, but on the inside I felt like nobody could understand who I was or what I was going through. And so that disconnect between what I was on the outside and who I felt like on the inside was really tough to deal with. And I'll be honest, that was probably it was a really big burden and probably a negative addition to my life for I'd say about, let me do the math here, like 13 years. When I was about 23, 24, I went to physical therapy school. It was really a hard time for me in the beginning, but long story short, I ended up meeting my wife, and it was this flip that switched. Sorry, a switch that flipped. And I realized that everything in my life, including my eyesight, had led me up to that moment where I was meeting her. And it was almost like the worst thing in my life led me to the best thing in my life. And ever since then, my eyes have been an absolute blessing. And it's been a story that I've shared so many times with so many people. And I think I just really, I hope that it can serve as an inspiration, and that I can serve almost as a blueprint for anybody else going through a hard time, because really this has given me incredible perspective, and I feel like my life is 100 times better with it than it would have been without it.
Yeah. So is there a lot of known information on that? Because like I have a degenerative eye disease, but like different doctors can't like place this is what you for sure have. So it's kind of hard to like get a good grasp on a full situation. Is there a lot of good information out there on what is going on?
There's good information. It's on the rarer side. So I think it's 1 in every 15,000 people have it, but it doesn't present the same way in everybody. So some people might be my age, 27, and not have any visual impairment. And some people might have a lot more visual impairment at the age of 10 than I have right now at 27. So it varies. I think the hard part about Best disease is the uncertain nature of how it presents and how it progresses, and you just never know. And also the fact that there's no cure currently, because it's on the rarer side of eye diseases. The research kind of lags behind the rest of the eye field. So while there's I'm sure stuff in progress right now, all I could really do is keep an eye on it, no pun intended, and just kind of deal with it as it unfolds.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way. It's not one of these bigger things. It's not cancer research. It's not all these things. It's always on the news and new studies coming out all the time about it. So it'd be cool to have, somebody with, some, not necessarily to have it, but with a lot of money to be able to fund different research and do something like that to kind of see what could, it's one of those things to where it's almost trying to describe it. It's it's kind of like when you go to the gym, it's you have almost all the same ability and the same potential. And it's just this one tiny, an eyeball, it's it's not like your whole leg's cut off or, your a whole system is messed up. It's this tiny little thing. And it's just hard to imagine how that can have such a big impact.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you would be able to relate to this, but it's the way you see the world, the way, your window into the visual world happens through your two eyes. And so even though they're small organs compared to the rest of your body, a tiny problem there could really cause a big consequence in terms of how you interpret and interact with the world around you. I mean, I don't know what it's like for you, but for me, one of the hardest things is recognizing faces, because I have a lot of my central sight that's missing. From far away, I can't tell who's who. And so people will walk toward me and either one of two things will happen. They'll wave at me and I have no idea who they are, or they won't wave at me and I think I know them, so I wave and it turns out they're a complete stranger, and then it's super awkward. But I've learned to embrace that aspect of the condition, and it's led to some pretty funny encounters.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like having this conversation and hearing somebody else's experience, because personally, I don't have anybody else that I really know going through anything like it. So, do you have anybody, are you in not a support group per se, but are you connected with anybody that you can kind of relate to, talk to about it kind of thing?
That's a great question. I mean, it runs in my family. Nobody in my family who's older than I am has the condition where it presents. So I believe my mom was a carrier. That's the way I got it, but she doesn't have any visual impairment. I have a little cousin who has it, and his hasn't really progressed much. So no, I'm really the only one in my family, in my circle, who deals with this. And I've connected with other people online who have gone through similar things. But for, I'd say 95% of my life, I was the only one dealing with it. And that was hard because, again, and I'm sure you could relate, it's hard for other people to understand when they're not the ones experiencing it. And again, it just really changes the way you view the world. And that can be a tough thing when you're the only one who sees it the way you see it.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of going back to when you first got into going to the gym, was there somebody in your family, a friend? How did you get there instead of anything else, really?
That's a good question, because I guess now that I think about it, I could have chosen other avenues to vent and to cope that might not have been as healthy as exercise. But I don't know. You know what? I played sports my entire life. And at the time that I was heading to the gym, I had to stop playing baseball. Baseball was one of my first loves. My dad played and he coached me, and that was something I always wanted to pursue, but I started getting hit in the face with quite a few baseballs, and the sight impairment and baseball don't really go well together. So I think I transitioned my effort and attention to football around that time. And I realized if I wanted to be good at football, I had to get bigger, I had to get stronger, I had to be faster, because, I was middle of the road. I was not not super athletic, but not super clumsy. And I wasn't huge, but I wasn't small. And I just wanted to be better. So I think that drive to be better at a sport was what led me to the weight room. And from there, like I said, I was just hooked almost immediately. I mean, there's something so exciting and addicting almost to pushing yourself physically, seeing results and going back and repeating that process and getting stronger, making friends at the gym and just learning about yourself. I've learned more about myself in the weight room than I have almost anywhere else.
Yeah, I think it's such a cool place because it's like it's kind of an equalizer for a lot of different people. It doesn't matter if you're going through something, if you lost your job, if you lost your girlfriend or whatever, if you have if you're blind, deaf, mute, doesn't matter. You can really, it's one of those places where you can kind of like get to where anybody else can get. And I think that's kind of a cool, sports aren't really that way. You talk about baseball, like the average baseball player has like, ridiculously great vision. And it's kind of one of those equalizing places to where you can go and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter really. You can just achieve.
Yeah, that's so true. And to just build off that point, I think one of the really, really amazing things about fitness in general, whether it's the weight room or running or another sport, endurance sport, is just that I think for me, my limits that I place upon myself, when they are mental, they're abstract. When things are floating around between your ears, it's hard to pin down. It's hard to commit. It's hard to be accountable. But when you go to a space and say it's the gym and you put weight on a bar and you lift that weight, you are going to eventually reach a point where you can't do anymore, or you can't do one more rep. You can't do any more weight, and your body and mind just want to stop. And you get this opportunity to say, no, I'm going to do one more, or I'm going to go one more. I'm going to keep going. And it's that struggle that is just so valuable. It's been so valuable to me because it builds this resilience, and it's not just physical. For me, I would say 99% of the benefit I get from the gym is mental and emotional. And it's this place where you can go and do hard things and come back the next time and go and do even harder things. And it's just like life, because, I don't know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be able to see, or if 2 days from now I won't be able to see, whatever it is. Life gives you hard things. And the gym for me is a way to prepare, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally for those hard things. And I don't know if that made sense, but that's like where my heart lies, in the gym.
Yeah, I think it does. And it's like, even for somebody, I feel like it's a place where you can go and kind of like you said, it's like you're practicing. It's almost like even your hardest workout's just a practice for like the hardest thing that's going to happen in your life. And, hopefully that's just a hard workout. But if it's not, it's kind of like, okay, I've done some, I've gotten through some things, and it's not quite comparable to, a terrible event happening, but at least it's kind of something to do with it.
Yeah.
So what led you from just kind of working out and loving it to being like, okay, physical therapy? Because a lot of people probably wouldn't make that next step, because that's a pretty decent commitment.
Yeah, totally. To tell you the full story, I need to go on a little bit of a tangent, but I promise I'll come back. When I went to college, I went to Bucknell University out in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, which if you guys are not from the Northeast, you probably don't know where that is. But anyway, it's a small liberal arts college. I studied molecular biology, thinking I wanted to go into either research or become a medical doctor. And my sophomore year, I decided to do research with one of my professors. She was studying the effects of testosterone on chicken eggs. So what we did was we took 200 chicken eggs, injected half of them with testosterone, half of them with a saline solution, hatched them all, 200 chickens. Now, if you are a really big animal lover and you love chickens, like just skip forward like a minute maybe. But long story short, I took care of all those chickens for 6 weeks. I fed them every morning, fed them every night, weighed them once a day, and you get connected. And then, we had to put them all down, and we dissected all their organs, and we ran all these tests. And a whole year later, we found nothing significant. And I looked back at that year of my life that I spent in a lab and doing all this stuff that ended up having very little value. Like there was no value there. And I just thought, well, one, I love people, so I can't do this because I can't be away from people. Two, I want to help people. And three, I love exercise and fitness and movement. And those things all together kind of made me think, all right, physical therapy is a perfect place to meet people in a place where they need help and to use exercise and movement and empathy to help people get to where they want to be. And then at that point, I transferred to Rutgers University so I could study exercise science. And then I got my degree in 2016, graduated from Drexel then in 2019 with my doctorate in physical therapy.
Gotcha. And I think physical therapy is like, at least to me, one of the like highest levels of like respect when it comes to the fitness industry. You know, we have a lot of, unfortunately, like personal trainers who just, you know, because of social media kind of have access. If they're an influencer, if they just have a lot of followers, they can, you know, say, hey, here's a program. And I think it kind of like waters down a lot of the industry that honestly, like even before social media, I don't think was super respected in the first place. But then you go and kind of do something like physical therapy. I think you gain a lot of respect from that. Did people kind of not necessarily like respect you more, but kind of, did you feel yourself almost be more confident with that kind of, I know there's sometimes like the imposter syndrome and all this other stuff you get when you're especially like fresh out of school and everything. And did you feel yourself kind of any like confidence boost when it comes to like that kind of thing?
Man, that's such an interesting question. The answer is yes and no. Yes, when I had my degree, I felt accomplished. The title gave me a little bit more confidence and like, hey, yeah, like I actually know this stuff. I graduated with this degree and I went to all this school. And then when you're in the clinic, obviously people take you a lot more seriously when you're a doctor of physical therapy and not just a student or not just a personal trainer. But on the flip side, I am a huge, I don't think advocate's the right word, but I really don't believe in titles. I believe in titles, you know, like people earn them and they mean things and whatnot. But at the end of the day, if someone's going to remember me or someone's going to interact with me, even if it's in a physical therapy capacity, I don't want them to remember like, oh yeah, like Joe was my physical therapist. I want them to think like, oh wow, Joe had an awesome impact on my life. Like he's a good friend. Like he cares about me. Like I don't care what people call me. Like people can call me whatever they want. And like that's the thing about the physical therapy title that I think sometimes people don't realize. It's like it is just a title, and at the end of the day you still have to care about people, you still have to know your stuff, you still have to go in and do your job and help people to the best of your ability, whether or not you're a personal trainer, a physical therapist, or a student, or a cashier at a grocery store. Like I heard, this is tangential again, but I heard this awesome story about this barista in an airport who was serving coffee on Christmas Eve. And she was like the happiest, most energetic, positive person that you'd ever meet. And she served this guy coffee and he said, I have to ask you a question. He said, like, you know, you're in here on Christmas Eve. You'd probably rather be with your family. Why are you so happy serving coffee? And she said, because I'm not serving coffee, I'm serving happiness. And like, it was her interaction that she cared about. It wasn't the coffee, it wasn't what she was doing, it wasn't her title. It was how she influenced and impacted other people. And I think like for me, the title is great. It gave me more confidence, but at the same time, title or not, I'm still the same person. And like my job is to make people better and help people in whatever capacity I can. So I guess long-winded answer, yes and no. Title gave me more confidence, but at the same time, like I'm still just a person, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think it comes down to almost like a lot of pride in what you do. You know, if you love it and if you want to help people, I think it goes a long way. And it doesn't matter what you do. You know, if you have those two things, you can be happy doing whatever.
Totally. And like, you know, as someone who has a podcast, I think a podcast is such a cool way to influence and impact people through a genuine conversation. And I'm sure your voice and your presence and your energy does that for the people who listen to you. And like, you don't need a title to do that. You do it as, you know, Daniel, the human being. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah. I think that's part of like this technology is the good part of that is it gives us kind of the power to do that kind of thing on our own, and you can help other people and learn. That's part of like this whole thing was to learn myself, and it's just been such a cool experience getting to do that.
Definitely. I agree.
So how did you how would you kind of say your experience went with the physical therapy when you first got into it? Was it as you expected, a little different?
Yeah, school was what I expected. School, I had an incredible experience at Drexel University here in Philadelphia. Program was really centered on, obviously the technical skills and the foundational skills, but also being a human being and not losing that part of healthcare. And so I had a great experience, great classmates, met my wife, graduated, went into the field right after I graduated, started working at a small outpatient clinic here in Philadelphia. Um, the field was what I expected, but I think I was hoping it wouldn't be. And what I mean by that is the outpatient physical therapy model, driven by insurance, is they tend to be on the higher volume side. So where you're seeing quite a few patients an hour, keeping up with productivity just to make sure that the business can make money, especially as reimbursement rates are decreasing just annually, it seems. So that part wasn't my favorite. I didn't love the fact that I was seeing 2 or 3 or sometimes more people an hour, because where I feel like I'm at my best is when I'm one-on-one, when I can be fully present, where I can meet people where they are and help take them to where they want to be. And that's really hard to do, especially as a new grad, let alone seeing 2 or 3 or 4 people an hour and kind of having your head spin around the clinic. Every time you get someone set up with one thing, 1 or 2 other people need something else, and you don't even have a chance to breathe, let alone think or interact with people. So that part of the profession really rubbed me the wrong way. And it's not a knock on any specific clinic or our profession, really. I mean, I think it's more of a knock on the system, the medical system. But yeah, so it was what I expected because I had heard that and I had experienced that as a student, but I was hoping it would be different. And I was a little disappointed that it wasn't in my case.
Gotcha. Is that why you kind of decided to take a different route? Or it's so hard because if you like what you do and you really feel like you're helping people, but you can't do it to the maximum of your potential, like that must be just a tough kind of, situation to be in.
Totally. Yeah, it was part of why I left. And so for everybody listening, about 3 weeks ago now, I left my job to pursue full-time online performance coaching and do my writing and podcasting and speaking and whatnot. But I think what the driving force is a combination of that I couldn't be at my best because I wasn't able to give people my full attention, but also actually my brother-in-law and sister-in-law had their first child recently, about 5 months ago. And my brother-in-law works from home. He's a financial advisor. And I really got to see him spend a lot of time with his daughter and his wife and be present right from the start as a father. And I thought about my future, and my wife and I would love children someday. And I thought about my current situation where I was working 40 plus hours a week in a physical clinic, coming home, hustling, coaching, podcasting, YouTube, blog, you name it, I was doing it. And I realized that lifestyle was not sustainable and it wasn't what I wanted down the road, especially when we have a family, hopefully someday. And so I felt like I needed to make that change now. 1, to maximize my impact and potential down the road, but 2, to set myself up for a lifestyle that I want and not just hoping that it comes, but actually making it happen before I actually need it to be there. So it was really a combination, and it's been a great transition so far, but I think my heart really does still belong in a physical therapy setting, at least in a part-time capacity. And so I've been toying with the idea of maybe finding a one-on-one clinic where I can treat maybe, 6 to 10 patients a week and still do all my other stuff and have a flexible lifestyle.
And when you say performance, like what does that specifically mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to me, performance coaching is helping people reach their highest potential, perform at their highest level, not only in a sport or a fitness endeavor, but in life. And so a lot of what I do revolves around fitness. It revolves around people who want to get stronger, who want to feel better, look better, run further, run faster, whatever it is. But then I like to weave in the mindset component, the nutrition component, sleep, hydration, et cetera, because to me, if I'm going to coach somebody, I want to take a holistic approach because people are more than their fitness. And while fitness for me is a huge part of my life, it's not everything that I am. And so if I'm going to coach somebody and I want them to be able to perform at their best, it's going to involve everything about their life, not just the physical aspect. And so while I do have some clients that are more focused on training for a marathon, or other clients who are more focused on training for a powerlifting meet, and some clients who just want to lose 10 pounds, everybody gets the same attention and the same holistic overview that I would give to anybody. And I guess to go on top of that, this is nothing to do with the performance aspect, but just as a coach, one of the things that I really enjoy about coaching, especially in the capacity that I'm doing right now, is I have the time and capacity and energy to give people my full and undivided attention and to really be there for people. And so when I have coaching calls with clients, we might spend the first 10 or 15 minutes talking about the program or some struggles they're having physically. And the next 10 or 15 minutes, or however long it is, might be about life or their job or a stressful situation they've experienced or a joy or a win or a celebration that they're going through. And that's one of the best parts about coaching, is the relationship you get to build. And performance coaching is just an avenue for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who want a personal trainer or a coach or whatever, they don't think about it as like this really tight relationship you have with somebody else. You know, you're trusting them basically with your health, especially kind of the way you're going about it, with kind of trying to tie in so many different aspects. Like, you know, if you're really trusting that person with the advice that they're giving you, you know, that's some real like trust. Really, it's just it's kind of crazy the responsibility that we have when we're doing that kind of thing.
Totally. It's you know, it's a privilege. And that's the way I've looked at it from day one, whether it's physical therapy or coaching. It's an absolute privilege and honor to be in a position where someone is trusting you with part or all of their wellness. And it's a big responsibility that I think sometimes we take too lightly, whether we're a therapist or a coach or a trainer, because it really is a big deal. And every interaction is a chance to change somebody's life, whether we know it or not.
Whether it be through like physical therapy or performance, when you first started really working with people professionally, what was kind of some of like the biggest surprises you got from people when it comes to just like them in that setting and trying to do your job to the best of your ability?
Oh man, there are so many surprises. You know, I had a woman refuse to work with me one time because I was too chipper, as she put it. It was like a 7 o'clock in the morning appointment, and she literally walked in. She put her hand up, like basically in my face, like a stop sign, and said, "No, not you today. You're too chipper." And she was serious, and we didn't work together after that. But I would say like the biggest surprise is just how, on two extremes. Let me go two extremes here. On one end, how invested some people are in their health and wellness, and how they will literally do anything to get to where they want to be. And then on the other extreme, where all somebody does is complain about this chronic pain and condition and whatever they've been dealing with, and are not willing to take ownership of the fact that they need to play an active role in changing things. So I guess on one extreme, I was pleasantly surprised at how driven some people were and invested in the process. And on the other extreme, I was disappointed and shocked, quite frankly, to see how apathetic and almost like just people wanted a quick fix, and they just wanted to be fixed. And I didn't expect that.
Do you think that like that super motivated person versus completely unmotivated, do you think that that's at a level that we just sometimes can't fix and can't change no matter what? Because to me, it's like, I think some people may be like that, but I think for so many more people, it's that they just don't have good information to be like, oh, that actually can help, like this, and this. And because I feel like a lot of, at least my motivation comes from when I learn something new, I love like trying to apply it to how it can help me feel better, you know, perform better, whatever. It just like that motivates me more than anything. So I feel like maybe education is a lot of people's big issue.
Education is absolutely huge. And I guess that's another shocking thing that I realized when I was out in the field is just how little people know of the actual truth about how our bodies work. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times someone came in and said, I can't bend forward because my disc will pop out. Like discs, for anybody listening, like discs don't pop out. I could talk about that forever, but I'll leave it there. Yeah, so education's a huge piece, and there are definitely some people that I think are beyond being able to be sufficiently educated and motivated in the current system and setting. Because again, when you only have 5 interrupted minutes with somebody, it's really hard to get a deeper, more meaningful point across, which is what I didn't like. But yes, I don't think people come into physical therapy for pain. I think people come into physical therapy because their pain is impacting and limiting who they are and what they can do. So I think if you can get to the root of what that person is really experiencing and what that pain or that limitation is stopping them from doing, and you can tie everything back in terms of the treatment, we're doing this treatment because it's going to address this problem so that you can be this person. If you can tie it together and bring it down to that deep, 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 meaningful level, I think 9 times out of 10 people will listen and do what you're asking of them. But yeah, it's definitely tough to do that in the current model. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I think the model or the system, whatever you want to call it, needs fixing. And, I think when right now it's like, somebody comes to you, whether they be 30, 50, 90, it doesn't matter, but they're coming to you and they're probably past the education system. They're no longer probably in a lot of cases trying to find, educational sources. But when they come to you, that may be the time they do get something. They may get something, or if they have a heart attack, they might go to, they're going to be at the doctor. They're going to say, oh, you need to cut out this. You need to start doing this. You need to do this. I think it's just the wrong, you're approaching it from such a wrong angle whenever, you try to fix, you're not doing anything preventative. And I think if we could just start as young as possible and really, really, because it's like the human health, what's more important to a human than our health? And it's like, it should be nothing, but we get so little real education on how to take care of ourselves. We get so, I've learned probably, who knows, 100 times more, 1,000 times more since I've graduated college even than I learned previously. And of course, I learned a lot in college. That's probably where I learned, the most, obviously, when it comes to my major, but like nothing pretty much in high school, nothing in elementary school. Like just we're so concerned about test scores and, passing people through and grants and funding and all this other stuff, getting quote unquote healthy food into cafeterias. Like that's not really happening, but all these things that are just seem like should be secondary and tertiary to just, are people healthy?
Yeah, I could not agree with you more about all of that. And it's so funny. Right before I hopped on this podcast, my co-host and I were recording a podcast with someone else. I won't say his name, but he was talking about this exact thing. And he's on a mission to change this about society. And he said, it used to be more common for him to walk down the street and see a lot of people who were in relatively good shape and healthy. And the person who stuck out was the person who was not in good shape, the person who was overweight or on the heavier side. And now it's the opposite. And he said where he walks down the street and he sees somebody who's in really good shape and it catches his eye. And it's like, wow, that's different. And I think it's so sad because I personally have gained more from exercise than I could possibly ever have imagined, both in terms of physical health benefits and otherwise, like we spoke about. But yeah, I mean, you just look at how people pass away. And I can't tell you how many of my patients have diabetes or heart disease or lung disease. And all of these things are likely preventable or avoidable with exercise and a better diet. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. but it does have to happen. And I think the education system fails us in that way. I agree. I was just talking with somebody else also about how I wish in school I learned about how to do taxes, how to invest in the stock market, how to do all these practical things rather than, what was the capital of Belgium? I couldn't tell you now. I have no idea. So yeah, I agree with you, but I think movement and exercise is paramount for society as a whole.
Yeah, and I think, at a certain point, there's only a certain amount of time in a day for people to go to school and a certain amount of time for people to be in school. But I think it would be another kind of thing would be to just encourage learning more. I think the way we might be teaching people is completely turning them off to learning. So then they don't want to, continue that education when they get out of school. Because like I said, what I've learned since I've graduated is who knows how much more than, what I feel like, and at least retain, I've probably obviously learned more, if you're going to go notebook for notebook, but the stuff that I retain and I feel like is important to my life, it just seems like we should be doing a better job of not just what we teach, but also making people lifelong learners. I think that would be a massive, change in culture.
Yeah, I think, learning is one of those things that I never appreciated until I was out of school. And I talk with my wife about this often, and just about how, if you're ever in a situation where you're feeling like an imposter or you don't know something, you're feeling overwhelmed, I think the ability to learn and the willingness to learn are like the two most important qualities you can have. Because if you're able to learn and you're willing to put in the work, there's really nothing you can't do. And in this day and age, there's no excuse. If I want to learn how to take apart a car and put it back together, I literally have no excuse. I could do that if I am able to learn and willing to learn and have access to the internet, which if you're listening to this podcast, you have access to the internet. So there's just no excuse not to learn. It's like such an incredible thing. And I think it keeps you young as well. I know so many people who are older in age, but young at heart, and they never stop moving and they never stop learning. And they're just two powerful forces.
Like I said before, education just opens people up to just so many different new ideas and maybe motivates them to do something they would never do before. But when it comes to learning, like we're so tuned in to things like social media, and we try to, maybe people who do want to learn don't know where to go, they go there. And I think there's just so much, I hate the word misinformation, but I've used it so many times now, but it's like, and even if it's not bad information, there's a billion different opinions and ideas and ways to do it. What are some of the things within like physical therapy alone, and maybe, moving to performance next, but within physical therapy that you hear people like common beliefs that are just kind of like, that's really not that true?
Oh man, well, I already mentioned the discs. Discs don't pop in and out of place. Let me see. There's just so many. That there's a right or a wrong way to sleep. There's no right or wrong way to sleep. Just sleep.
I'm glad you said that, because that's something that I think about a lot. I'm like, is my spine right? Am my neck right?
Well, I mean, yes. All right. So let me say this. If you're dealing with a certain ailment or pain or injury, there might be a more optimal way to sleep for a short period of time to allow certain tissues to have reduced stress or just improve whatever it is, right? Like there are reasons, but in general, if someone's healthy and has no problems and they go into a mattress store and someone tells them there's a right or a wrong way to sleep, that does not exist. And then the same thing goes for posture. There is no right or wrong posture. There is no better or best posture. I've heard it said that your best posture is your next posture, meaning that any position is okay, but if you stay in it for too long, that's when it starts to become a problem. I can sit here on this podcast and, hunch my shoulders forward and extend my neck, and it might look all bad. But if I'm here for like 2 minutes and I move out of it and I have no problem, that's no problem. So I think people get so fixated on right and wrong and this and that, when in reality, like movement and the human experience is a gray space. And as physical therapists and in our profession and healthcare in general, general, there's just so much we don't know. And I think one of my biggest pet peeves is when people pretend that they know a definitive answer. And like conviction is a really dangerous thing, because if you think about the kind of things people were convicted in, like, you know, I don't know, 70, 80, 90 years ago, people were giving people lobotomies because they had like a minor headache, you know, and they were sure about it. And now we look back at those people now and think they were nuts. So I guess all that to say is like within physical therapy, there's very little black and white, and most of it is gray. So if you hear something that's scary or you're unsure about something, and you want to check it with me, like feel free to find me and shoot me a message on Instagram. I'll tell you the truth. But in general, like I think the posture thing, the sleep thing, and just like, you know, pain doesn't always equal tissue damage, and tissue damage doesn't always equal pain. So you can have pain and there might not actually be anything physically wrong or damaged in your body, and vice versa. You can have something that's physically damaged and not have any pain. So it's just not a one-to-one correlation. And I think that's personally helped me as probably a self-diagnosed hypochondriac. Whenever I have an ache or a pain, I'm a lot more laid back about it now because I usually know that it's nothing serious, and that has only come through my education and experience. But yeah, those are my misinformation bits.
Yeah. And it's funny because of course, like social media, like helps all these things keep going and rolling around. And it's like, if you figure it out, then there's, you know, a million other people out there that's like, oh, you know, they still have this idea, which I think that's definitely one of the negatives of social media. When it comes to performance though, I feel like performance is probably maybe even a little bit crazier. Like when people come to you, like what's the most common thing that people, and you're like, no, that's not right.
Yeah, I have one that comes right to mind. And then I don't want to forget about this, but I do want to talk about the word performance. I'll touch on it. But the biggest thing that I get is people who come to me who have been trying to lose weight and are eating like 900 calories a day. And they've been doing that for the past year. And they walk on a treadmill for like 2 hours a day. And they're wondering why they're not losing weight. If you are eating 900 calories a day, I don't care what size you are, what gender you are, how inactive or active you are, that is not enough calories for a human being. And so I would say the biggest thing that happens when people come to me when they're looking to change their body composition is that they've chronically been under eating. And that chronic under eating actually, without getting into the details, changes the metabolism in a disadvantageous way for losing weight. So people are really just digging themselves into a bigger hole when they're not eating enough food for a long period of time. So that's probably the big one. And in a lot of those cases, we will actually work together to increase the amount of food somebody's eating, which is so counterintuitive to somebody who wants to lose weight. We will actually start by reversing them up and having them eat more. But in the end, if they're patient and they stick with it, it works. And then what I'll say about performance in general, I think the way I use performance in terms of coaching is to optimize health, longevity, wellness, and performance all together. But as Nick Bear, he's the CEO and founder of Bear Performance Nutrition, which is a company that I work with. He said performance and health are usually not the same thing. And it took me a second to register, but it's true, right? Like I could, try to perform for a bodybuilding competition and I get my body fat down to 4% and I'm dehydrating myself to look really cut and shredded and lean. And that is not healthy. You're performing for your specific task, but that is not healthy. And so those two words and things like often diverge. And I think finding a balance between performance and long-term sustainable health is so important, but something that nobody thinks about. They just see somebody like lifting 1,000 pounds or running a 4-minute mile and not even thinking like, is that healthy to get to that level? And like what you need to do to get your body to that level might not be healthy for somebody else. Like it's just this whole, they're different things, Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because that was something that for whatever reason, I don't know if I heard it or whatever, but I've been thinking about that so much recently.
And the way I think about it when it comes to those people who are training for specific tasks is it's almost like if you just imagine this horizontal line, a black horizontal line in the middle of a white frame, the line is health, and that's your optimal health. When you diverge from that for performance, it should look like a peak and it should come back. You want to get to that performance level, do your thing, and then come back down to your health, right? You don't want to stay at whatever performance level. If somebody lived at 4% body fat for years, their hormones would be completely out of whack. Their hair would probably fall out. Like, who knows what would happen? So when you're thinking about performance, it's like a transient state. You're training to get somewhere, and then you're trying to come back from it,
Yeah, it's like you see these, UFC fighters or whatever, they get fight ready for like 24 hours, and then they're back up 15 pounds on fight day. It's so funny to see it. And I think Joe Rogan was talking about like he'd love to see the intensity if they would like take out weight or put in more weight classes instead of having like such big gaps, and then you could your performance you actually would be healthier at your performance time and not so crazy dehydrated and defooded and all this other stuff. But it's also interesting how there's these people who that's what they specialize in, is how to peak that unhealthy but performance level status in people.
Yeah. And, I think this is an interesting topic to talk about and important for anybody who's listening, who's thinking about performance or comparing themselves potentially to other people who are performing at a high level. I mean, great example. I watched a documentary a few years back on cyclists, and I forget which group of cyclists it was, but they were talking about blood doping. And so what these cyclists would do they would essentially dope their blood so they'd have more red blood cells. But what that does is it makes your blood thicker. It improves your performance because you can carry more oxygen. So their cycling was incredible. These people were superhuman. And if you just saw them perform, you would be like, I want to get to that. But what you don't see is behind the scenes, they have to wake up every 2 hours at night and hop on a stationary bike, because if they sleep for more than 2 hours, their blood will clot and they will die, because that's how thick it is from the blood doping. And so what you don't see a lot of times are the consequences of performance. You just see the performance, and it's a dangerous thing when you want to get to that place and you're comparing yourself, but you have no idea what went on to get there and how unhealthy potentially that is. And I think that's, one of the negatives of social media is that middle ground and that journey to performance doesn't always get shared in complete transparency. And people just see the shiny, like cool stunts, and they want to do that. It's different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it even goes past performing and for anything specific, but sometimes the unhealthy ways that people just want to achieve their normal everyday fitness goal. I think that's also a dangerous path, whether that be on purpose or whether that be just through bad information. I think it's so, it's a dangerous place when you, like you said, kind of eat 900 calories a day for, years and walk on the treadmill and do. And I think it's so interesting because I think as humans, our brain wants like a black and white answer. Like, should we do this? Yes. Should we do that? No. Instead, it's like, no, sometimes you can do that, but sometimes you can also do this. And I think I think that our brain part of our existence wants a black and white, do this, do that answer.
Totally. Yeah. And if there's anything I've learned about life, it's that it is just not black and white. It is not predictable. It is not easy. And that's, again, to tie it back, the beautiful thing about fitness and life. And when you're chasing performance or you're chasing your full potential, like it's a bumpy road. There are unexpected things that happen. And one of the valuable things about having a coach, and I can say this from being a coach and also having a coach myself, is that when those bumps in the road comes along, or the unexpected turn happens, you have somebody there who potentially has been through that before, who can see things from a different perspective and give you guidance, so it doesn't take you so long to pivot, or you can do things more efficiently and not lose as much time, or whatever it is. And I think that's like one of the things I love about coaching, is helping guide people and walk with people through their journey. And it's really rewarding, really challenging at times, but really rewarding.
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with that concept of like, oh, I know this information, so I don't need anybody's, guidance. Sometimes we know what to do, but doing it, it's like, do we do it or not? And that's a big thing.
Totally. Yeah. And this is not even about coaching, but just more about support and accountability and guidance and community. My business coach proposed to me that I should have a personal board of advisors. And when it was proposed to me, I was taken back because I thought boards of advisors were something that companies had, not people. And it was this really interesting concept where he said, yeah, get your friend who's your biggest cheerleader, get your friend who will tell it to you how it is, get your friend who is an expert in this area, and get your friend who like is in the middle, and you get them together like twice a year and ask them to genuinely just give you feedback on how you're doing with your goals, and you're transparent with them, they're transparent with you. And I thought like, wow, what a cool idea of like building a team around you, a team of friends and people who care about you to help you stay on track with what you want to do. And, whether it's a coach or friends or whatever it is, I just think it's invaluable to be able to have people in your life who are going to help nudge you in the right direction and keep you on track, because there are days and weeks and months, sometimes maybe even years, where you just won't feel like it. And it's possible to get through those times by yourself, and there's a lot of willpower that goes into it. But I also think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with reaching out for help or having support, because I will be the first to admit I am not who I am today because I did it all by myself. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have shaped me into the person I am. And I'm sure that's the same for you and anybody listening. You just think back of all your teachers, your friends, your family, the stranger who held the door for you. Everybody has an impact, and leaning into that is really important when it comes to fitness, but also life.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, definitely. And just to that point, and we've touched on social media a few times here, and we've kind of ragged on it a little bit, and rightfully so. There are some bad parts, but I think one of the best parts and the best things about social media is this, like, you and I, for example, connected via social media. This conversation never would have happened otherwise. We're in two different parts of the country. We live two different lives, and we never would have been able to do this without technology and social media. And I can personally say that some of my best accountability partners, my best friends, my best supporters and encouragers have come through social media, people who I've never met in real life and might not ever meet in real life. And it's just amazing that when you are intentional about the energy you bring to the universe and the intention of looking for people to build your circle with on social media, you can find those people, and you just have to know what you're looking for and why you're using it. Because on the flip side, like you said, it's the misinformation's out there, and it's also very easy to get sucked in to social media and waste, multiple hours a day just getting nothing done. That's very real.
Oh yeah, it's funny how great they are at that. With each new platform that comes out, they're just getting better and better.
It's crazy. Yeah. There's I think it's called The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary on Netflix. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it, but my parents watched it and told me about it, and then there's been several people telling me to watch it.
It's scary. It's exactly what you just said, but it's kind of like the back end of like how they're doing it, and it's scary, but I won't spoil anything.
But getting into your writing and your speaking, how did you get into that? When did you start doing that?
Yeah, I started writing seriously probably 4 years ago. I started a blog, and my first blog was about my eyesight and my struggle with my loss of eyesight. And I wrote that blog because the year prior, which was my first year of physical therapy school, was hands down the hardest and darkest year of my life. I mean, I woke up every morning, and I never felt like this before, but I woke up every morning and I just couldn't put a smile on my face. I could not pick myself up no matter how hard I tried. And for that first year on the outside, I was a kid in the front row class, like hand up every question, like friends with everybody, smiling, laughing. But on the inside and behind closed doors, I was absolutely falling apart. And I realized that if I was feeling like that, how many other people out there are also feeling like that? And so I shared that story with the world through my writing, and I got a really awesome response. A lot of people who I knew and a lot of people who I didn't know or didn't know very well reached out to me and encouraged me and told me that it really resonated with them. And I still get the chills thinking about it because, you know, I just get the chills thinking about it. And that moment of vulnerability encouraged me to continue writing. And as I wrote more people reached out. I connected with more people. I found more enjoyment and fulfillment in my own writing. And I've just realized with every blog that I write, every newsletter, whatever it is, I realize that I love it more and more. And to me, writing is just this incredible process where you get to discover more about yourself every time you write. And when you share your story and you're vulnerable and you're authentic, writing is also such an incredible way to impact and lift up other people. And so it's been really appealing to me for a long time, but over the past 4 years, it's really blossomed. And so I have my blog, which I really am trying to write like 4 to 8 blog posts a month at this point. I have a weekly newsletter I send out with a lot of, encouraging and inspiring and personal growth oriented content. And I'm writing a chapter in a book and then working on my own book as we speak. So I do quite a bit of writing. And then the speaking aspect really stemmed from me coming across speakers online that changed my life. And namely, Inky Johnson. I don't know if you've ever heard that name.
Yeah.
I came across basically his story. He was telling his story. And if you guys are listening and you don't know who Inky Johnson is, like I couldn't recommend listening to his story anymore. But it resonated with me on such a deep level where I just felt like my life was changed from that moment. And it was crazy to think that somebody can just speak their story and it could change one person, in this case, my entire life trajectory was just altered at that moment. And I realized that, I feel like I was given this eye condition for a reason, and it's part of my story. And I need to share that story with the world. And speaking to me has always been appealing. I don't know why. I couldn't explain it, but the idea of being up on stage in front of a bunch of people, it might feel scary to 99% of people. It feels exhilarating to me. And so that's definitely something I'm pursuing actively.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. And yeah, he has such a motivational, but even past that, just like deep inspiration, like having this crazy, I mean, not to like tell us the whole story, but coming from like absolutely nothing and then working just as hard as somebody can work, getting what he wants, and then just having it, taken away is just crazy. I can't.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's just part of his thing that he can share with other people, and I know he's definitely impacted more than one person. And then how those people impact the other people. It's so interesting, and I wonder, who impacted him and who impacted the person that impacted that person. I think, it's just people out there telling their story. And I think it's so cool because that's like you said before, it's an authentic version of something. And not to like keep going back to social media, but like we use it as this platform to like show our best things going on in life. And I think that can sometimes like water down the reality of life. And it can kind of like, if you're having a bad day and you get on there and you see everybody else looks like they're having a good day, like how do you draw motivation from that? It looks like your life is the only one that sucks, but when you hear that something a real story with real consequences, and that's where you can be like, if they can do it, what's holding me back from doing it? I think that's just so powerful.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. And I will say, this podcast is not about necessarily what I'm about to say next, but I feel like it's important just based on where we've went with things. And it's just a quote, and it's a quote that's changed my entire life. And I guess when you're thinking about social media, whether it's in fitness or it's just something else, and you're comparing yourself and you're thinking about your life in comparison to the other people you're watching, like, dark seasons happen for a reason. And this quote, just like, another thing that changed my life. Christine Kane once said, sometimes when you're in a dark place, it feels like you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. And I can't tell you how many times in my life it has felt like I've been absolutely buried. And I look around and it looks like everybody else has sprouted up above the surface doing fun and crazy and great things. And I feel like there's a pile of dirt on top of me, only to come to find out 2, 3, 4 years down the road that that thing had happened to me to bring me to a certain place to experience a certain thing. And I don't know. I just think it's like important to know that like everybody's in their own process. You can't compare your chapter of your book. You can't compare your chapter 1 of your book to somebody else's chapter 10 of their book. Like it just doesn't work that way. And the grass is greener where you water it. And it's not greener on the other side. It's greener where you give attention and effort and love. And so I don't know. That was just another tangent, but I think it's important.
We could certainly have. It's funny because I listened to so many different podcasts, and saw this one come up, and it was a 5-hour podcast, and I was like, how does someone talk for 5 hours? and then like you have these. Whenever I do something, I'm like, okay, I get that now, how that could happen. But for sake of time, let's go ahead and close this one out. I'd love to certainly have you back on at some point and just keep the conversation going, because I think you're genuine. You have a lot of good stuff to share, and just the conversation back and forth is really great. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you. And if you just want to share your social medias and anything else that you want to share, that'd be cool.
Sure. I'd say the best place to reach me or just find out anything more about me is on Instagram. And my handle is joerinaldi.dpt, which stands for Doctor of Physical Therapy. And my blog is joerinaldi.blog. And if anybody out there listening wants to connect or is just curious about anything that we talked about, feel free to shoot me a message, and I promise I'll respond. You might not believe me, but I swear you will find out. I will respond.
Awesome, man. Well, like I said, I really appreciate you coming on and your openness and honesty. And it was cool to get to connect like this.
Of course, man. I feel the same way. And thank you again.